for pre-construction analyses of a number of natural resources. In that other category, we have, based on the advice of the Regulatory Advisory Panel, we ask applicants to look at scenic resources and natural heritage resources, but we do not, no matter what shows up on the analyses, we would not be requiring mitigation for those, only for wildlife and historic resources. State Corporation Commission across the board exempts projects, renewable energy projects of 5 megawatts and below rated capacity. Our statute, unfortunately, right guys, makes no mention of a de minimis exemption. It would have made our lives much easier if it had spoken to that issue. But we felt that as a matter of policy, if the General Assembly were telling us to make it easier to permit renewable resources, then we should not turn around and make our regulations more difficult. So by regulation, we have no requirements if a project has a rated capacity of 500 kilowatts or less. They don't have to notify us, they don't have to do anything. Over 500 kilowatts up to 5 megawatts, we do have some things. Notify us, let us know that you have met the local government land use requirements, but there's nothing substantive. These are things you would be doing anyway. One of the things that has been sort of a challenge for my colleagues at DEQ to grasp onto, I think they have the idea that now that we have this permit by rule authority, I have to take care of everything, and they don't have to worry about their permits anymore. And I say, no, 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 no. Having your other environmental permits is a prerequisite for having the permit by rule coverage. You may have noticed among the 14, one of them said, have you obtained or at least applied for? And we are interpreting applied for to mean have submitted a complete application according to what the issuing agency calls for as complete. If you needed to get a wetlands permit before, you still need to get a wetlands permit, and you have to certify to us for the permit by rule that you've done that, or that at least you've set forward the complete application. Another concept that we spent many days talking about in the original wind wrap is, where does our authority begin and end for this permit by rule? And we had to study the statute very carefully to understand that. You may have noticed on one of the first slides it said that we're supposed to issue permits for the construction and operation of these projects. But as we all know, those are only 2 of the phases of a project. Who's handling the siting and the decommissioning? And of course the answer is the local government. And just as before our statute, the local government retains all of its usual powers over health, safety, and welfare, and when it's a prerequisite that the applicant have certification from the local government that they have met local requirements, all of this comes into play. And I don't have to tell the folks in this room that because of that authority over siting, a local government can essentially put a stop to plans for a project. They have that ability to say whether the project can or cannot be sited within their jurisdictions. Many stakeholders had come to us since we began the wind wrap back in 2009 and said, look, we are eager to participate with the state in formulating the PBR regulations, but what are we going to do about problems we face at the local level? We have recently established a local outreach effort. It's not within our regulatory authority. It's something we're trying to do to be of assistance to local governments and to stakeholders, and we are bringing people from all the different groups, many local government representatives, including some who are with us today, to try to come up with model ordinances. And certainly we are looking to the Pennsylvania model as one that we can learn a great deal from. There will be other functions that we're trying to perform also. We hope that we are providing a forum where people can talk over these issues, perhaps their differences, and try to come up with some voluntary things that local governments may avail themselves of if they would like to. You've heard reference to Virginia's energy policy and what we do and don't have. One thing that we do have, I think, in our favor is that our energy policy is codified. And part of that energy policy calls for, in appropriate situations, advancing renewable energy sources. I understand that this summer a new energy plan will be promulgated for Virginia. So we'll all need to look forward to that. I've tried to remind our RAP from the very beginning, you know, people are going to have a lot of different views about wind energy and where it should or shouldn't be and how it should develop and so forth. We're here to implement a statute. The General Assembly of Virginia has made many decisions about what will and won't be done in Virginia and how it will be done. For us to try to debate things that come outside of that statute does not move the ball forward at all, because it's not in our authority. So whereas a lot of people will come before a group and say, I want you to think outside the box, I say just the opposite. I want you to think inside the box, and remember we have to do what the General Assembly told us to do. And even though other issues are important, since we don't have the authority to deal with them, let's do the best job we can on what our task has been assigned. So that box is defined by a number of things. First of all, as we've already said, it's keeping in balance our two goals: to promote renewable energy, to protect the natural resources, especially wildlife and historic. But also we had to spend a lot of time with legal interpretations of this statute. Those of you who are not from Virginia may not be aware that we have a part-time legislature. We meet 60 days, 1 year, 45 the next. Everything has to be done in that amount of time. When you get a complex statute like ours, it's never going to be perfect. It can't be done. I don't think ever, no matter how long it's spent, but certainly not in the short sessions that we have. So our statute, I think, accomplishes many things. In some areas, though, it's difficult to understand the language, what the intent was. So we had to spend a lot of time on legal interpretations. This is how we know. We only do construction and operation. We don't do siting. And people were suggesting we need to put these requirements for decommissioning. And the answer was no. Legally, we can't do that. That sounds like a basic thing, but believe me, when you're looking at a statute for the first time, right? You know, we spent a lot of time being sure what the law said. And also the reality, if people have in mind that we're supposed to do something that requires 20 PhDs to go out and do things, we can't do it. That's beyond what realistically we can do. As we tried to come to grips with balancing our statutory goals, we fairly quickly developed within DEQ, and David Paler is my boss, the director of our department. So I attribute this to him. Didn't ask his permission first, of course, but he subscribes to this. He said, if our goal is to make it easier to do a renewable energy project in Virginia, then you have to have a really good reason for requiring more for a wind project, let's say, than we do for a coal-fired project or Walmart. It's not to say that those reasons might not exist, but you have to prove your point. Now with wind, research has shown, I think, to almost everyone's satisfaction that there are impacts on bats. So that was something that we needed to look into for mitigation for bat impacts. That's a special and unique impact. So that's what you will see in our regulation. But if it's something that where that principle cannot be proved, then our theory is that we should not impose something that we would not otherwise impose for other types of projects. Wind projects obviously are very complex. It's not easy to come up with everything that has to be done up front. But that was our task, and again, I have nothing but high compliments for the experts on our RAP who helped us with that. Most permits in Virginia are approved by citizen boards, and regulations are approved by citizen boards. This permit and the regulations that support the permit program are approved by the director. So that's a different twist. We have to deal with our sister agencies in order to come up with a decision. That is a first. And that is, although we always work together as state agencies, this is a more closely defined relationship where our decision must take into account their advice. We look to folks such as those of you in this room for expertise because we don't have a history of wind development. So we have to look to other parties to help us learn how this industry can look in Virginia. And as I said, our time limit is totally unreal. We've finished wind. Solar is being reviewed in the governor's office now. It's been approved by our director. We'll go to public comment. We've started on the combustion renewables, and we then have the water-based ones left to do. So we have a gracious plenty to work on. We do have companies who are coming to us for informal pre-application meetings. This is a process that we are developing. If any company is interested, we would invite them to come talk to us early and often. We can have conversations that are entirely informal. On the other hand, if a developer is in the process and says, look, we don't want to go and invest huge amounts of money on something until we know that DEQ and the sister agencies sign off, we can arrange for that to happen so that you get a written decision on certain plans you might have. One thing that I think developers like very much is that once you give us that complete application, we have to give you an answer in 90 days. So that is, I think, a great deal of comfort to applicants. Well, it shouldn't have been quite so fast. You'll have a copy of this. I'd be glad to talk to any of you or any of your colleagues about plans for locating in Virginia. And we try to keep this website up to date on all of our renewable media. And I would encourage you to use that.